It feels like DIY fillers and at-home cosmetic procedures are becoming more and more popular every single day. And as a result, stories of the pretty devastating results are also becoming more and more common. This definitely isn't a new trend. For decades, people have been turning to underground injectables in the pursuit of the perfect face and body, like the Korean former model I spoke about a couple years ago, who injected her face with cooking oil, or Jordan Park, who I spoke about very recently when he passed away after allegedly undergoing a cosmetic procedure in a hotel room, also while he was still under investigation for the death of Alice Webb, who he allegedly carried out a liquid BBL on, which went horribly wrong. And that was also allegedly what he died from as well. But every year there seems to be even more stories like this. And despite people being increasingly aware of the dangers, there always seems to be someone desperate enough to try these risky procedures themselves. And even in just the last month or so, another person has come to people's attention online because they tried to use DIY fillers and it didn't go very well. There's a good chance actually you might have seen this person on TikTok recently. Her name is Elva. Elva's face is quickly spreading across TikTok, and it's her face that's catching people's attention, but unfortunately not for a good reason. She's openly described herself as botched, and sadly it is hard to argue with that. As you can see, her face looks incredibly swollen and painful. In fact, her appearance is so extreme that a lot of people have actually speculated that it's all fake, that she's using a filter, AI in some way, or even wearing some kind of mask to trick people online. But the truth is, Elva and her face are very real. People have commented saying that she lives in their home city and that they've seen her in public, and she really does look like that. And she's even appeared in a video with a doctor who is actually trying to help her. Her current appearance isn't a mask or a filter, it's actually a result of her using DIY silicone injections on herself. By the looks of it, a fair few of them. Elva's story is sad, but also one that isn't uncommon. There isn't a huge amount of information about Elva online, but what I can tell is she's a 27-year-old trans woman from Poland who apparently started transitioning around 7 to 8 years ago, back when she was 19. Now, obviously I wouldn't usually focus on that fact at all, that she's a trans woman, but the fact that she was transitioning is actually quite important in this story, because according to Elva, it's what led her to try the dangerous at-home cosmetic procedures that caused her current appearance. Now, she didn't jump straight to DIY fillers though, and in fact just a few years ago she looked very different to how she does now. But mentally it doesn't sound like Elva was doing very well. She has spoken very openly about her issues transitioning, particularly in a more traditional conservative country like Poland. I don't know that much about Poland or people's views there on trans rights, but Elva has talked about her experience, saying how she found that most people there haven't been accepting of her identity or her appearance even before her transition took a pretty drastic turn. And it sounds like the mental strain of living in a society that she feels doesn't accept her for who she is eventually took its toll on Elva. It's not clear when exactly it happened, but she said that the bullying she received for her appearance is what led to her to try fillers for the first time, because she wanted to look more feminine. Often facial feminization surgery, if it's available even, is an expensive and painful process involving procedures like jaw contouring, brow reshaping, rhinoplasty, lip lifts, fat grafting, and in a lot of countries these surgeries can cost tens of thousands of dollars, and it takes years because of long consultation periods and long wait lists. For many trans people, these procedures just aren't a genuine option. Either they live in a country where being trans isn't accepted and these procedures aren't even available, or because they don't, and realistically never will, have the huge amounts of money required to pay for them. And that's where these DIY methods come in. So instead of qualified surgeons, people turn to underground practitioners. Instead of prescription medication, they turn to dodgy imported products and anonymous advice online. Instead of regulated procedures carried out by professionals, they experiment on themselves in their homes. And according to Elva and people who've watched her live streams, that seems to be exactly what happened here. A few years ago, apparently, Elva started performing regular facial injections on herself using things like industrial grade silicone oil, paraffin oil, and acrylic she bought online. She wanted to give herself fuller lips and cheeks, softer contours, and overall a more feminine face, but the results never looked quite right, because injecting yourself with silicone from a random source online is never going to get you the results that you want. She kept adding more and more, even injecting herself every day for a little while, until she got to what we see today. Part of this is definitely also due to to an addiction to having cosmetic procedures done. Elva has admitted this quite openly, even saying she likes being addicted to what she's doing. But on the other hand, she's also said that she'd like to remove some of the silicone because she doesn't want to look botched. She apparently wants to find a way to keep injecting herself, but somehow avoid damaging her face even further. I mean, that's just not possible. She also apparently said before that she thought silicone would be dissolvable, and for some reason, she thought that injecting the silicone and then dissolving it would somehow make her face tighter. But that's not how that works. Even if it could be dissolved, which it can't, it would likely have the opposite effect of tightening your skin. You're stretching it out. It's not just gonna tighten, right? The reality is that a lot of the substances people buy online and inject themselves with, like non-medical grade silicone, are incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to remove entirely. They require extensive, complex surgery to remove, but it's likely they won't be able to get all of it, and you'll be left with permanent scarring anyway. Silicone can also migrate throughout the body, trigger chronic inflammation, destroy existing tissue, and cause permanent disfigurement. It can even enter your bloodstream, traveling to your vital organs and causing blockages in the lungs, hearts, or brain, causing a stroke or sudden death. Despite all these issues these injections have caused for her, Elva still says that she doesn't regret doing it because despite the damage she's done, she apparently prefers the way she looks now to how she used to look. She says she would consider getting some of the silicone removed if she could afford to, but she says that ideally she just wants to remove all the skin and the fat on her face down to muscle because she thinks the scar tissue that would grow over it would be like new skin that would be softer and tighter than her current skin. Again, I'm pretty sure that's not how it works, but if you watch any of the clips on her TikTok, there's a good chance you'll see her rubbing a cotton pad over her face. She said that what she's applying when she does this is salicylic acid. She does it pretty much every day apparently, partly because it makes the skin feel like she's doing something to fix her issues, but also because she thinks it's slowly removing layers of her skin. That's not how salicylic acid works. Cosmetic salicylic acid, it doesn't dissolve your skin at all. So I don't know really where she's got this information from, but this probably explains why her face often looks so red and irritated. You can see so much irritation. Her skin is probably already sensitive from the reaction to the injections, and then applying salicylic acid every day is just going to make it even worse. I can also understand the need to feel like she's doing something at least, but she really needs help from a professional, and luckily it looks like she might be getting it finally. On May the 9th, Dr. Marek Wasilik, I think his name is pronounced, an aesthetic medicine specialist in Poland, posted on TikTok saying that he'd seen Elva's videos on the platform and that he'd invited her in for a consultation because he wanted to help her. He also said that it's a very difficult and complex case that will require the help of multiple specialists in different fields. He said that Elva has injected at least 30 milliliters of silicone into her temples. Bearing in mind, let me just get something for you. 30 milliliters is your average bottle of serum. So that much silicone in her temples alone is crazy. He says even likely more, which is why it's dropped down and covered her eyes the way it has, because it's so fucking heavy. He also said that the scarring on her cheeks was caused by complications when she injected herself with fat dissolvers, and that the skin on her face has become so hard from all the injections that they feel like plastic, which is apparently the main reason she's stopped injecting herself at the moment, because she cannot get a needle into her skin anymore. He's apparently already got a plastic surgeon on board to help, and is also looking for a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and an ophthalmologist to help as well, so they can make sure Elva gets all the treatment she needs in every aspect. Hopefully, this means that Elva will finally get the help that she needs, but even Dr. Wasilik has admitted that the psychological aspect of things will play as big a part as anything else in here. He said he isn't sure she's 100% on board with trying to go back to a more natural appearance yet, saying that she seems like she partially wants to and partially doesn't. I mean, you can't force anyone to get help if they don't want it, we all know that, but it would be incredibly sad if Elva didn't make the most of this opportunity, because it's not an opportunity most people get. And like I said earlier, Elva is just the most recent example of how resorting to DIY fillers and other underground cosmetic procedures can go horribly wrong. There is a long history of these kinds of stories, especially in the trans community, where access to professional care is often inaccessible, unaffordable, or just outright hostile towards them. And unfortunately, this leaves many trans people vulnerable to people who want to take advantage of them. One of the worst examples of this just might be the next person I want to talk about, Oneal Ron Morris, otherwise known as the toxic Tush Doctor. Morris's questionable career in cosmetics started in the 2000s when she began offering unauthorized cosmetic procedures without a medical license. Morris performed illegal butt, hip, thigh, cheek, and breast augmentations on dozens of women. She posed as a licensed medical professional and would often wear scrubs, latex gloves, and a laminated ID card in an attempt to appear more professional. She preyed on people who were desperate for affordable cosmetic enhancements, particularly targeting people from the transgender community, which Morris is a part of herself. Unfortunately, like I said, many transgender people, particularly in low-income areas or countries where these kinds of procedures aren't readily available, are often forced to resort to putting their trust in questionable underground practitioners, fake doctors, in order to get the body that they feel comfortable in. But what they got from Morris wasn't beauty or comfort. Instead, they got trauma, disfigurement, and in some really tragic cases, even death. One of Morris's most popular services was her DIY butt injection procedures, but instead of using medical grade silicone or FDA approved fillers, she injected patients with a homemade horrifying concoction, which often included a mixture of cement, mineral oil, fix-a-flat tire sealant, and super glue. These materials are obviously toxic and were never meant to be injected into the human body. Morris would also often seal the injection sites with cotton balls and glue, wrapping the area tightly afterwards in an attempt to shape the buttocks. Morris often performed these illegal procedures in hotel rooms, private homes, or makeshift clinics. There was no attempt at sterilization, no aftercare for her patients, and Morris accepted no responsibility for the damage that she caused. Many of Morris's victims lacked the financial means to seek proper medical care or sue Morris after their procedures went wrong, so they were forced to suffer swelling, intense pain, and horrific infections in silence. Morris got away with her actions for years, until one of her victims went to the police after she suffered abdominal pain, infected sores, and flu-like symptoms as a result of a botched butt lift. She allegedly paid Morris $700 for the procedure in May of 2010, not knowing that Morris would inject her with a mixture of cement, that tire sealant, mineral oil as well. Morris had told her that she was using medical grade silicone, the same lie she told all her victims. When the woman complained that the pain was becoming too much, Morris allegedly replied saying, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. We just keep injecting you with the stuff and it all works itself out." The victim reported Morris to the police shortly after the procedure landed her in Tampa General Hospital with life-threatening symptoms, including pneumonia and an MRSA infection. Investigators were looking for Morris for over a year before they finally caught her in November of 2011. She was charged with practicing medicine without a license and causing serious bodily injury. Then things got worse for Morris over the next few months, as over 30 women came forward claiming to have suffered similar botched procedures performed by Morris. Two of the women claimed that they met Morris in a Motel 6 for the procedure in 2009. One of them says that the substance she was injected with was stored in an old Pedialyte bottle, and the other says that she couldn't remove the cotton ball over the infection wound after the procedure because Morris had super glued it on. Both women were injected with a slightly different mixture, that fix-a-flat stuff, bathroom caulk, I think it's caulk, that, bathroom stuff, cement, super glue, and mineral oil. They paid Morris between $3,000 and $4,000 for the privilege. Another victim, Raji Naran Singh, paid Morris for injections in her face. She says she felt that she could trust Morris because she was also transgender, but soon after, her face became infected and she had to go to a real plastic surgeon for help. She said in an interview that the doctor pulled pieces of cement out the side of my face. Morris was already in a lot of trouble at this point, but things were about to get even worse, both for her and for one of her victims. Shtaka Nubi was a 31-year-old mother of 3 who paid Morris over $2,000 for 10 injections in her buttocks, hips, thighs, and breasts. She received the injections over a period of several years between 2007 and 2011. After her last injections, she apparently told family and friends that she was experiencing severe burning pain, blackened skin, and hard lumps at the injection sites. Shortly after, she reported Morris to the Florida Department of Health, detailing the issues she was having and begging for help. But it was too late. Shataka Newby died on March 17, 2012. The medical examiner stated that she died of respiratory failure caused by massive systematic silicone migration due to the injections performed by Oneal Morris. Morris was out on bond at this point, but she was rearrested after Shataka's death and charged with manslaughter. But still, Morris showed no remorse and accepted no responsibility for what she had done. While awaiting trial in 7 separate cases, Morris asked the judge to reduce her bail of $40,000 because she couldn't afford to pay it. She said, "I'm not a danger to society. This whole experience has taught me a lot about how people would try to destroy my life. I just want to put it behind me." Thankfully, the judge refused to lower Morris's bail so she couldn't harm anyone else while she waited trial. Morris remained in prison for years awaiting trial, but eventually in 2017, she accepted a plea deal on charges of manslaughter, causing serious bodily harm, and practicing medicine without a license. During the sentencing, Morris still showed no remorse, saying that she never intentionally hurt anyone, and that she never ever, nor would ever dare, inject any human with any type of unknown substance, except that's exactly what she did. She made it herself. But Shataka's family also had a chance to speak at the hearing, and they emotionally relayed the horrific pain and anguish Shataka had lived with before her death. Her mother said, "My daughter died the most inhumane death. For 18 months she suffered." I think what makes this story so scary isn't just the shocking and bizarre ingredients Morris was using in her procedures, it's the trail of devastation and heartbreak she left behind, as well as the complete lack of remorse that she's shown. It was all about her, because behind every headline and every disturbing detail are these real people who trusted her, who were desperate, and who she left afraid and in pain. And for many of Morris's victims, the physical scars were only part of the ordeal. They were often people who were already vulnerable, people who regularly fell through the cracks in our society, and in their attempts to feel comfortable in their own bodies, they were made to suffer, either financially unable or just too ashamed to seek the help they desperately needed. Ultimately, Morris was sentenced to 10 years in prison with 5 years probation for her crimes, but that was all the way back in 2017, and as is often the case, Oneal Ron Morris didn't serve her full sentence. She was actually released from prison in June of 2025, so the toxic Tush Doctor is back on the streets. She is presumably still on probation, but given her history, I doubt that would stop her from going straight back to charging people for her dangerous procedures. Now, I don't want anyone to think I'm making this out to be a problem just for trans people. It's an issue that's affected all sorts of people for a long time, and it seems to be becoming a bigger problem for everyone in recent years. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that the trans community is likely far more vulnerable to the dangers of DIY fillers for a lot of reasons, many of which I've already touched on. In many countries, getting approved for gender-affirming treatment, gender-related treatment, can take years. In others, social stigma makes openly seeking care dangerous for a trans person, with many trans people saying that they've experienced outright transphobia and mistreatment in the healthcare system. And a lot of the time, the procedures they need aren't available for trans people at all. And even when treatment is technically available, the cost of surgeries like facial feminization can make it financially unrealistic. A lot of trans people struggle to find employment because of societal stigma. Studies over the last few years have shown that transgender adults in the US are around twice as likely to be unemployed as cisgender adults. They're also far more likely to be in jobs that pay minimum wage, offer part-time hours, and that don't provide benefits. And none of this is because they don't want jobs or because they aren't educated enough to get better jobs. It's because companies continue to discriminate against trans people during the hiring process, and they continue to face discrimination once they are employed if they do find a job. For example, a lot of trans people have talked about being outed in their workplace against their wishes, and less likely to get promotions because of their gender identity, and even being fired or forced to resign when their gender identity was discovered. As a result of all of this, trans people on average earn less than cisgender people in the US and are more likely to be living below the poverty line. Even trans people who hold a college degree are more likely than cisgender graduates to earn less than $50,000 per year. So with no affordable access to gender-related healthcare and higher difficulty making enough money to ever pay for expensive procedures, People improvise, because when people become desperate enough, dangerous alternatives can begin to feel like the only option. And that's why underground transition culture has existed for decades. Long before TikTok, long before Discord, long before social media at all, trans people were already sharing hormones, cosmetic treatments, black market medications, and survival advice among themselves. They helped each other as much as possible because nobody else was going to help them. And it's a trend that continues today, with trans communities all over the world looking to each other for advice, buying hormones and fillers from untrustworthy sources, and becoming their own healthcare provider. Because in many cases, they still can't go to professionals for advice, they still can't get access to products from trustworthy sources, and the healthcare system still doesn't care about them. But like I said, this may be an issue that heavily affects the trans community, but there are also plenty of cisgender people risking their health by turning to DIY or underground filler injections. Some of Oneal Morris's victims were cisgender women, as we've already seen, and there have been plenty of other similar cases in recent years. Just last year, a former model and actress, Cindiana Santangelo, died after a botched butt enhancement performed by a woman known as the Butt Lady. The Butt Lady's real name is Libby Adame, and unsurprisingly, she wasn't qualified or licensed to carry out the procedure, though she had allegedly told Cindiana she was qualified. Cindiana, I think that's how you pronounce the name, sorry, who had appeared on shows like CSI Miami, ER, and Married with Children, had invited Adame to her home to inject silicone into her buttocks, as she wanted to try and smooth out lumps that had appeared there recently. But sadly, the injections were administered incorrectly, and soon after, Cindiana had trouble breathing and had blood pouring out the injection sites. The silicone had entered her bloodstream, causing a pulmonary embolism, and within hours of the procedure, Cindiana was dead. What's crazy is that she had been convicted less than a year earlier for the manslaughter of Carissa Rajpal, another woman she had performed unlicensed procedures on back in 2019, who had also died of an embolism as a result. She'd been sentenced to 4 years and 4 months in that case, but was released after receiving credit for time served. Despite knowing the risks of the procedures she wasn't qualified to do, she went straight back to doing the same thing, and less than a year later, she had killed again. This time, she was convicted of second-degree murder, and in November of 2025, she received a sentence of 15 years to life in prison for her crime. And that's just one of dozens of cases like that in recent years. I've already spoken about similar cases before, like the ones I mentioned at the start of the video, but just in the last few years, there has also been Christina Ashton Gorkani, a Kim Kardashian lookalike, who died after receiving a liquid BBL in 2023. There was also Sasha Dean, a British woman who underwent a liquid BBL at the end of 2023. She was apparently told it was a risk-free lunchtime treatment, but in reality, it almost killed her. She's since said that the pain was so excruciating right from the very first injection she received. And at one point, she had turned to look at her feet and they had turned black. She ultimately suffered organ failure and went into sepsis as a result of the procedure. She was in a coma for 5 days and given just a 5% chance of survival. Somehow she managed to survive though, and spent over a month in the hospital recovering, and still suffers from lasting damage to this day. Even Cardi B has talked about getting illegal butt injections in the past, even saying that she was going to go back to get a touch-up, but before she could, the woman who'd done the procedure was arrested because she had killed someone else while carrying out the same procedure. And this is just cases in the US and Europe, but the issue is often worse in other parts of the world. South America in particular has a huge problem at the moment, with some even calling it an invisible health crisis due to the amount of people resorting to DIY fillers. Reports in recent years said that many women, again mostly trans women, in the region are getting several litres of industrial grade silicone injected into their bodies by unqualified injectors, with a large percentage of them seeing major complications as a result, like the silicone migrating into their blood vessels, entering their lungs, and even spreading to their bones. There is a similar problem in Asia, especially in places like China and even South Korea, where for the same reasons as everywhere else, thousands of people are resorting to at-home filler injections or treatments carried out by unlicensed and untrained injectors. This is becoming a global issue, and with more and more people like Elva willing to talk about their experience on social media or stream on platforms like Kick, it's also becoming an increasingly more visible problem. Hopefully, increased awareness of the dangers of DIY fillers will help put some people off who might have otherwise tried it, but a lot of people feel like they don't have a choice but to accept the risk until healthcare is made more accessible and more affordable. And until the stigma against trans people is removed, awareness alone is unlikely to be enough to stop the reliance on DIY fillers getting steadily worse and worse. Because when people feel completely trapped between unbearable body dysmorphia and impossible barriers to healthcare, some will take horrifying risks in order to change their bodies. That's the uncomfortable reality behind stories like Elva's or anyone else we talked about today. It's easy to look at these cases from the outside and think they're acting recklessly, but for many of them, it's not recklessness, it's desperation. It's the difference between surviving and not surviving. Behind these clips on TikTok, YouTube, the streams on Kick and Twitch, behind the mockery and the judgment and the spectacle people often make when they see stories like Elva's, behind all that are some uncomfortable questions we need to ask ourselves. How many other people are currently trying to transition without support, alone in bedrooms or bathrooms, injecting themselves with dangerous substances from questionable sources, all because safe medical care feels completely out of reach for them? And how much worse does the situation need to get before we actually do something about it?